Okay, we're up to topic 13, which is graphing trig functions. Our first question is going to ask us to find an equation for the graph. So the two trig functions we're responsible for graphing are sine and cosine, and the parent function for each one is a times either the sine or the cosine of bx plus c. Remembering that, this is usually capitalized, remembering that a talks about the amplitude, b helps us find the period, and c is the vertical shift. So let's go ahead and start this function with the amplitude. Remember, the amplitude is the height from the middle. So the middle of our function is right here at 0. The amplitude is going to be how high we go from the middle. So it's going to be the number 3. In order to find the b value, I have to know the period. Remember, the formula for the period is 2 pi divided by the b value. Now I can see the graph, so I should be able to see the period, and I can use this formula to calculate the b value. So the period is how far my equation goes on the x-axis before it starts to repeat itself. So my function starts right here, uphill at 0, and if I trace my function, I'm going to keep going until I get to the next place where I'm uphill at 0, which is right here. That's one period. And you can see if I break up the graph into segments like that, it just keeps repeating itself over and over, the same shape over and over. So 2 pi divided by b is going to equal my period, and my period goes all the way to this value, which is pi. So 2 pi divided by b should equal pi. So my job is just going to be to solve for b. If I want to do it the long way, I multiply both sides by b. So 2 pi equals b times pi, and divide both sides by pi to get the b value. Pi cancels here, so b is just 2. So I can see that if I take 2 pi and divide it by 2, I get pi by itself, which means my b value is 2. So when I go ahead and write my function up here, the sine of bx, I just calculated that b is 2. Up last, I have to find that vertical shift. Vertical shift is how far the midline moved from 0, but my midline's at 0, so I did not actually have a vertical shift. So I don't have to add or subtract any c value because I haven't moved. So this is my final function right here. All right. Up next, we're going to take a look at question 43. Now, this was a test question that was multiple choice, but it is important to know how to create a function like this on your own. Even though the CFE is also going to be multiple choice, it's just good practice. So again, we're going to go ahead and try and take a look at what this function is going to be. Oh, one more thing about this guy up here. See how it started at 0 and ended at 0? It went high, then low, then high again. It looked like a sideways S. That's how we know that it's a sine function. A sine function looks like an S. A cosine function looks more like a C, a sideways C. So let's take a look down here. We want to create the function that models this situation below. So here's our blood pressure problem. You guys will recognize this from the trig test. To write the equation here, we can again start with the parent function, which is going to be a times the sine or cosine of bx plus c. But in this case, we take a look, our function starts high, it curves down, and then goes high again. So that actually looks more like cosine than sine. So we're going to use cosine as our parent function here. All right, so let's go ahead and start with our amplitude. The amplitude, remember, is the distance from the midline. Now, our function keeps going back and forth between the number 125 and 75. That's the total height. Our midline should be right in between there. So all I want to do is figure out how high or low it goes from the middle. So from 100 to 25, it goes up 25. Or from 75 to 100, it goes up 25. So our amplitude is just the number 25. Then we have the cosine, and again, of bx. I have to go and find out what b is. The formula I'm going to use is 2 pi over b equals the period. And again, I have the function in front of me, the graph. I should be able to see what the period is. Now, my function starts up here at 125, and the next time it gets up to 125, it has gone 3 boxes. However, it takes 1, 2, 3, 4 boxes in order to make a unit. So it's gone 3 out of those 4 boxes. So my period is going to be 3 out of 4 units, and I have to solve for b. Now, I have a fraction equals a fraction here, so the easiest way to solve this guy is going to be to cross multiply. So 2 pi times 4 is 8 pi. equals b times 3, which is 3b. So to solve for b, all I have to do is divide both sides by 3, and I see that b is 8 pi over 3. So 8 pi over 3 is going to be the number we're going to be putting up here for my b value. Last but not least, I need to find my vertical shift, c, which is how far my midline has moved from 0. So my midline is right here. That's the center of my graph. Remember, it goes back and forth between 75 and 125, so the midline's right here at 100, and it's supposed to be at 0. So it has moved up 100 spaces from 0. So this is my equation. All right. Up next, we have a function, and we're going to identify the amplitude, period, vertical shift, and whether or not there's a reflection. Now, amplitude is just a distance from middle, so technically amplitude is always positive. They'll ask us to identify a reflection separately. Remember, a reflection can be expressed in an equation with a negative symbol. Technically, the amplitude is always positive, but since it's multiple choice, it should help take care of that confusion for you. So the amplitude, again, is just the a value out in front. Technically, it's 3. If you thought it was -3, that's totally fine. We can actually go ahead and say right now, because of that negative, there is a reflection. To find the period, I have to do 2 pi divided by b, and my b value is 1/2. So I have to do 2 pi divided by 1/2. I'm going to go ahead and keep, change, flip, to figure out what my period is. So 2 pi times 2 over 1, which is 4 pi. There's my period right there. And a vertical shift or a midline shift, that is a plus or minus after my equation has happened. And I don't have any plus or minus happening, so there's none. All set on that guy. Last up for my trig problems, we're going to write the equation of a sine function that has these characteristics. So this is all about these transformations. The amplitude is 2. Remember, amplitude is the a values. So 2 is going to go out in front of my sine function. The shift, the vertical shift is -3. I'm going to go ahead and throw that in right now. Vertical shift is going to be at the end of my function. Amplitude is being multiplied in front. And it said the period is 120 degrees. Notice it gives us our period in degrees. So you are more than welcome to convert those degrees to radians. Remember, to convert to radians, we multiply by pi over 180. Or we can use the alternate version of the period formula. Remember, I said that the period is either 2 pi over b, or if we're not measuring in radians, we would measure 2 pi on the unit circle with 360 degrees. And that also is a totally acceptable way to calculate the period if I'm measuring in degrees instead. So if I want to do the period for this guy, the period's 120, so 120 is equal to 360 over b. All I have to do to solve this guy for my b value is multiply both sides by b. So b times 120 equals 360, and then divide both sides by 120. So 360 divided by 120 will give me the period here. And 360 divided by 120 is 3. So this is going to be 3 times b. 3 is the b value, so 3 times whatever, x. There we go. So 2 times the sine of 3x minus 3. And that equation is all set. All right. We're going to go ahead and pick up with topic 14 in the next video.